I thought my biggest worry would be assembling that impossible crib, but my sister had other plans that would turn my perfect day into absolute chaos. The morning of my baby shower started like any other Saturday. I woke up at 6:30, even though the party wasn't until 2, because I couldn't sleep. After 3 years of trying to conceive and 2 heartbreaking miscarriages, this moment felt surreal. At 28 weeks pregnant with my first child, I finally had something to celebrate. My husband had left early to pick up the cake from the bakery across town. We'd ordered a simple vanilla cake with pink and blue frosting, keeping the gender a surprise until the big reveal moment we'd planned for the end of the shower. I spent the morning arranging flowers in mason jars, setting up the gift table, and obsessively checking that everything looked perfect in our small backyard. My mother arrived first, carrying 3 bags of decorations she'd insisted on bringing despite my protests that we had everything covered. She immediately started rearranging my carefully placed centerpieces, moving them 2 inches to the left, then back to the right, then slightly forward. I watched her fuss over details that nobody else would notice, but I didn't say anything. This was her first grandchild too, and I knew she was just as excited as I was. My sister showed up an hour before the guests were supposed to arrive. She walked through the back gate wearing a flowing sundress that seemed oddly formal for a casual backyard gathering. I'd expected her to come in jeans and a t-shirt like she usually did for family events. She gave me a tight hug and complimented the decorations, but something felt off about her energy. She seemed jittery, constantly checking her phone and glancing around like she was waiting for something. The guests started arriving right on time. My college roommates, coworkers, neighbors, and extended family filled our small yard with laughter and conversation. Everyone seemed genuinely happy to be there, and I felt overwhelmed by the love and support surrounding me. We played silly games, ate finger foods, and I opened gift after gift of tiny clothes, blankets, and baby gear that made everything feel more real. My sister volunteered to help serve drinks and mingle with guests, which seemed normal enough. She's always been social at family gatherings. But I noticed she kept pulling people aside for private conversations, and several times I caught her pointing in my direction while whispering to someone. When I tried to join these conversations, they would quickly change the subject or disperse. About halfway through the party, during the gift opening, my sister disappeared into the house. She was gone for almost 15 minutes, which seemed strange since she'd been so involved in helping with everything. When she came back out, she was carrying a small wrapped box and had that same nervous energy I'd noticed earlier, but amplified. The gender reveal was scheduled for the end of the party. My husband and I had planned to cut into the cake together while everyone gathered around to see whether the inside would be pink or blue. It was supposed to be the perfect ending to a perfect day. But as I was opening the last few gifts, my sister suddenly stood up in the middle of the group. She cleared her throat loudly to get everyone's attention, and the conversations around the yard gradually died down. I looked up from the baby monitor I was unwrapping, confused about why she was making such a formal gesture. Everyone turned to face her, and I could feel the shift in energy as people sensed something important was about to happen. My sister started talking about how special this day was, how happy she was for me, and how family was the most important thing in the world. Her voice was shaking slightly, and I could see her hands trembling as she spoke. The box she'd brought outside was clutched tightly in her grip. I had no idea what was coming, but something in my stomach started to twist with unease. Then she said it. She announced that she had some news to share with everyone, something that would make this day even more special. She opened the little box and pulled out a pair of tiny baby booties, holding them up for everyone to see. The yard went completely silent except for the sound of someone's drink being set down too hard on the patio table. She was pregnant too. 8 weeks along. She'd found out just a few days ago and had been dying to share the news with the whole family. She thought my baby shower would be the perfect place to make the announcement because everyone was already here and in a celebratory mood. She wanted our children to grow up together as cousins and best friends. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I could feel every single person at the party looking back and forth between my sister and me, waiting to see how I would react. My mother's face had gone completely white, and my husband looked like he'd been slapped. Several of my friends were staring at the ground, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even process what had just happened. This was my day, my moment, my celebration after years of struggling to get pregnant. And my sister had just turned it into her announcement party. I felt like I was going to throw up, and not from pregnancy nausea. My sister kept talking, filling the awkward silence with nervous chatter about due dates and how exciting it would be to be pregnant at the same time. She seemed oblivious to the fact that everyone was staring at her in shock. Or maybe she was aware and just pushing through it anyway. I finally managed to stand up, mumbled something about needing to use the bathroom, and walked into the house as quickly as my pregnant body would allow. I locked myself in the guest bathroom and sat on the closed toilet seat, trying to process what had just happened. I could hear muffled conversations starting up again outside, but I couldn't make out the words. After about 10 minutes, there was a soft knock on the bathroom door. It was my mother, asking if I was okay and if I needed anything. I told her I'd be out in a minute, but I actually sat there for another 5 minutes trying to figure out how to handle this situation. I'd never been in anything like this before. When I finally came back outside, the energy at the party had completely changed. People were making polite conversation, but there was an underlying tension that hadn't been there before. My sister was still holding those stupid baby booties and talking to my aunt about morning sickness. She looked up when I appeared and gave me a bright smile like nothing had happened. We still did the gender reveal as planned, but it felt hollow and anticlimactic. The cake was blue inside, which meant we were having a boy. People cheered and congratulated us, but it felt forced and awkward. Several guests started leaving shortly after, claiming they had other commitments, but I could tell they just wanted to escape the uncomfortable situation. My sister stayed until the very end, helping clean up plates and fold chairs like nothing had happened. She kept making comments about how fun it was going to be to plan her own baby shower and how she hoped I could help her pick out decorations. I nodded and made appropriate responses, but inside I was seething. After everyone left, my husband and I sat in our living room surrounded by baby gifts and tried to make sense of what had happened. He was as shocked as I was and kept saying he couldn't believe she'd done that. We talked for hours about whether we were overreacting or if we had every right to be upset. By the time we went to bed, we still hadn't figured out how to handle the situation. The next few days were weird. My sister texted me several times with pregnancy questions and comments about our babies being so close in age. She seemed to think everything was normal between us. Other family members called to check on me, clearly aware that something inappropriate had happened but not sure how to address it. My mother called 2 days later to apologize for my sister's behavior. She said she'd talked to her about it and that my sister genuinely didn't understand why anyone would be upset. She thought she was being sweet by sharing her news at a family gathering. My mother asked me to try to forgive her and move on for the sake of family harmony. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since the baby shower incident, and things have gotten significantly more complicated. I was hoping the drama would die down and we could all move forward, but my sister has apparently decided to double down on her behavior in ways I never saw coming. Last Wednesday, I got a call from my cousin who lives across the country. She started the conversation by congratulating me on my pregnancy and asking how I was feeling, which seemed normal enough. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. She asked me how I felt about my sister planning her baby shower for the same weekend as my due date. I had no idea what she was talking about. My due date is still 10 weeks away, and I hadn't heard anything about my sister planning a baby shower at all, let alone scheduling it for that specific weekend. I asked my cousin where she'd gotten this information, and she said my sister had called her the night before to invite her to the shower. According to my cousin, my sister had explained that she wanted to have her baby shower right around my due date because she thought it would be meaningful for our family to have 2 major baby-related celebrations so close together. She'd told people that she'd already talked to me about it and that I was totally supportive of the timing. I hung up the phone and immediately called my mother to see if she knew anything about this. She was just as surprised as I was and promised to call my sister right away to get to the bottom of it. Within the hour, my mother called me back with information that made the situation even worse. My sister had indeed been planning a baby shower for the weekend of my due date. But that wasn't the most shocking part. She'd also been telling people that I'd offered to help plan and co-host the event, turning it into some kind of joint celebration of both our pregnancies. She'd even suggested that we could coordinate our outfits and take pictures together as expectant mothers. I was completely speechless. Not only had she hijacked my original baby shower, but now she was trying to hijack my actual due date weekend and make up stories about my involvement in her plans. I couldn't understand how someone could be so tone-deaf and self-centered. My mother said she'd had a long conversation with my sister about appropriate boundaries and timing. My sister had apparently gotten defensive and accused everyone of being unsupportive of her pregnancy. She'd said that she thought family should be excited about new babies regardless of timing, and that she couldn't understand why everyone was making such a big deal about dates and schedules. But here's where things took an even stranger turn. My mother mentioned something else during our conversation that I hadn't known before. Apparently, my sister had been trying to get pregnant for almost 6 months before she succeeded. She'd been tracking her cycle, taking vitamins, and really focusing on making it happen. This information completely changed my perspective on the timeline of events. She hadn't gotten pregnant by accident or coincidence. She'd been actively trying to conceive during the months leading up to my baby shower. Which meant she'd probably known she was pregnant, or at least suspected it, for longer than she'd originally claimed. I started thinking back to her behavior at the shower and in the weeks before it. The formal dress, the nervous energy, the private conversations with guests, the mysterious disappearance into the house. It all started to make sense in a really disturbing way. She'd planned her announcement. She'd thought about it beforehand and decided my baby shower was the perfect venue for her reveal. This realization made me angrier than I'd been initially. It wasn't a spontaneous moment of excitement or poor judgment. It was a calculated decision to make my special day about her. And now she was trying to do it again with the due date weekend shower. I decided I needed to have a direct conversation with her instead of handling everything through our mother. I called her that evening and asked her directly about the baby shower planning. She confirmed that she was planning a shower for that weekend and seemed genuinely surprised that I was upset about it. She explained that she'd chosen that date because she wanted our family to associate that time period with celebration and new life. She thought it would be beautiful if our babies were born close together, and she wanted to honor that by having her shower near my due date. She said she'd assumed I would be excited about the timing and want to be involved in the planning. I tried to explain to her why this felt inappropriate and hurtful, but she kept interrupting me to say that I was being overly sensitive and selfish. She accused me of wanting to monopolize all the family's attention and not being supportive of her pregnancy. She said that pregnant women should support each other, especially sisters. The conversation ended with both of us frustrated and angry. She agreed to move her baby shower to a different weekend, but she made it clear that she thought I was being unreasonable. She also said some things about my reaction to her original announcement that really stung. 3 days after that phone call, I found out something that changed everything I thought I knew about this situation. My husband's sister, who lives in the same town as us, called me with information she'd learned through mutual friends. What she told me made me realize that this whole situation was even more calculated and intentional than I'd imagined. Update 2. I need to share what I discovered because it's completely changed how I understand everything that's happened. What my sister-in-law told me was so shocking that I initially didn't believe it, but after doing some investigating of my own, I've confirmed that it's true. My sister has been telling people around town a completely different version of events from my baby shower. According to her story, I'm the one who asked her to make her pregnancy announcement at my shower. She's been saying that I thought it would be fun to surprise everyone with double baby news, and that the whole thing was my idea from the beginning. But that's not even the most disturbing part. She's also been telling people that I've been struggling with jealousy and competitiveness throughout my pregnancy, and that I've been trying to make her feel bad about getting pregnant so soon after me. She's painted herself as the victim of my supposed selfishness and inability to share the spotlight. I learned all of this through a friend of a friend who heard the story at a coffee shop downtown. She recognized my name and thought the story sounded strange, so she asked around and eventually the information made its way back to me. When I heard what my sister had been saying, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I started reaching out to other people who had been at the baby shower to see if my sister had told them similar stories. What I found out was even worse than I'd expected. She'd been systematically contacting my friends and family members to give them her version of events, always positioning herself as the reasonable one and me as the dramatic, jealous sister. She'd told my college friends that I'd been cold and unsupportive when she shared her happy news. She'd told our extended family that I was trying to control when and how she could announce her pregnancy. She'd even told some people that I'd asked her not to have a baby at all because I wanted to be the only one with children in the family. None of these things were even remotely true, but she'd been spreading these stories for weeks while I had no idea it was happening. I felt completely betrayed and manipulated. It was like discovering that someone you trusted had been living a double life. I confronted her about the lies she'd been spreading, and her response was to deny everything at first. When I pressed her with specific details about who she'd talked to and what she'd said, she finally admitted to having conversations with people but claimed she'd been misunderstood or that people had misinterpreted her words. She said she'd been hurt by my reaction to her pregnancy announcement and had needed to talk to people about her feelings. She claimed she'd never intended to make me look bad, but that she'd been processing her own emotions about the situation and sometimes that involved explaining her perspective to family and friends. I told her that there was a difference between processing emotions and deliberately spreading false information about me to mutual acquaintances. I pointed out that she'd been actively damaging my relationships and reputation while pretending to be concerned about family harmony. The conversation escalated quickly from there. She accused me of being paranoid and making a bigger deal out of everything than necessary. She said that if I hadn't overreacted to her announcement in the first place, none of this would have happened. She blamed me for creating drama where none needed to exist. But then she said something that revealed what I think is the real truth behind all of this behavior. She told me that she'd always felt like I was the favored child in our family, and that my parents and extended relatives had always paid more attention to my achievements and milestones. She said that when I got pregnant after trying for so long, everyone rallied around me with support and excitement that she'd never experienced for herself. She admitted that she'd timed her pregnancy announcement to coincide with my baby shower because she wanted to experience some of that same family attention and celebration. She said she'd hoped that announcing her pregnancy at my shower would create a moment where everyone was excited about both of us instead of just focusing on me. This confession explained so much about her behavior, but it also made me realize that the problem was much deeper than I'd initially thought. This wasn't just about poor timing or social awkwardness. This was about years of perceived inequality and resentment that had built up between us. I tried to address her feelings about favoritism and explain that I'd never been aware of any inequality in how our family treated us. I pointed out that our parents had always been supportive of both of us in different ways, and that I'd never intentionally tried to monopolize attention or resources. But she wasn't interested in having that conversation. She said that I couldn't understand her perspective because I'd always been the one receiving the attention. She claimed that I'd never had to fight for recognition or support the way she had, and that I couldn't possibly relate to her experience. The conversation ended with her saying that she was tired of apologizing for wanting to celebrate her own pregnancy and that she was done letting me make her feel guilty about being happy. She said that if I couldn't be supportive of her during this time, then maybe we needed to take a break from each other until after both babies were born. I was left feeling completely emotionally drained and confused about how to move forward. Part of me understood that she might have genuinely felt overlooked or underappreciated in our family, but I couldn't excuse the manipulative behavior and outright lies she'd been spreading about me. The situation got even more complicated a few days later when my mother called to tell me that my sister had decided to move back to the East Coast to be closer to our grandmother during her pregnancy. This was completely unexpected because she'd been living in our hometown for 5 years and had never expressed any interest in relocating. My mother thought this might be a good thing because it would give everyone some space to cool down and process what had happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that my sister was running away from the consequences of her actions rather than dealing with them honestly. 2 weeks later, I went into labor unexpectedly at 36 weeks. It wasn't dangerously early, but it was earlier than anyone had anticipated. My son was born healthy but small, and we spent 3 days in the hospital making sure everything was okay with both of us. Final update. My sister didn't come to the hospital when I gave birth. She didn't call or text for 3 days after my mother informed her that her nephew had arrived safely. When she finally reached out, it was with a brief message congratulating me and saying she was sorry she couldn't be there due to travel logistics. I was hurt by her absence, but I was also too exhausted and overwhelmed with new motherhood to dwell on it much at the time. My husband and I were completely focused on figuring out how to take care of this tiny human who had arrived earlier than expected. The family drama felt distant and unimportant compared to making sure our son was thriving. But then something happened that completely shifted my understanding of my sister and her motivations. 3 weeks after my son was born, I received a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from my sister along with a small knitted baby blanket. The letter was unlike anything she'd ever written to me before. It was raw, honest, and full of emotions she'd never expressed directly. She started by apologizing not just for the baby shower incident, but for years of behavior that she now recognized as selfish and attention-seeking. She explained that she'd been struggling with feelings of inadequacy and comparison since we were children. She said that I'd always seemed to excel at everything I tried while she felt like she was constantly struggling to keep up. She'd internalized a narrative that she was the less successful, less accomplished, less loved sister. When I got pregnant after years of trying, she said she'd watched our family rally around me with a level of support and excitement that she'd always craved for herself. Instead of being happy for me, she'd felt envious and resentful. She'd decided to get pregnant partly because she wanted to experience that same kind of family celebration and attention. The timing of her announcement at my baby shower hadn't been spontaneous or thoughtless. She'd planned it specifically because she'd wanted to share in the joy and excitement that was focused on me. She'd convinced herself that it was a sweet gesture that would bring our family together, but she now understood that it had been selfish and inappropriate. She also admitted to the lies and manipulative stories she'd been spreading about me afterward. She said she'd been so defensive about her behavior that she'd created false narratives to justify her actions and make herself feel better about what she'd done. She'd known the stories weren't true, but she'd been too proud and stubborn to admit she'd been wrong. The most surprising part of the letter was her revelation about why she'd moved away. She said she'd realized that her feelings of jealousy and competition were so deeply ingrained that she didn't trust herself to be around me and my new baby without falling back into the same patterns of behavior. She'd moved across the country not to run away from consequences, but to work on herself and figure out how to be a better sister and aunt. She'd been seeing a counselor and working through her issues with comparison and self-worth. She said she was learning to celebrate other people's successes without feeling like they diminished her own accomplishments. She was also working on communication skills and learning how to express her needs and feelings directly instead of acting out through manipulative behavior. The letter ended with a genuine apology and a request for forgiveness. She said she understood if I needed time and space to process everything that had happened, but that she hoped we could eventually rebuild our relationship. She wanted to be a good aunt to my son and a supportive sister to me, but she knew she had a lot of work to do to earn back my trust. Reading that letter was an emotional roller coaster. I felt angry about all the pain and drama she'd caused, but I also felt sad for the years of insecurity and unhappiness she'd apparently been experiencing. I realized that I'd been so focused on my own life and challenges that I'd never really paid attention to how she was feeling or what she might be struggling with. I decided to write back to her. I thanked her for her honesty and told her that I appreciated her apology, but I also explained how deeply her actions had hurt me. I described what it had felt like to have my special day hijacked and then to discover that she'd been spreading lies about me to our mutual friends and family. I told her that I was willing to work on rebuilding our relationship, but that it would take time and effort from both of us. I said that I needed her to commit to honest communication going forward and to stop any remaining false narratives she might have shared with people. We started exchanging letters and emails over the following months. It was slow and sometimes difficult progress, but we gradually began to understand each other better. She continued working with her counselor and made genuine efforts to address her patterns of jealousy and competition. When my son was 6 months old, she flew back home for a weekend visit. It was awkward at first, but she was genuinely different in her interactions with me. She asked about my experiences as a new mother without making it about herself. She played with my son and seemed genuinely delighted by him without any undertones of resentment or competition. She also took responsibility for her actions in conversations with our parents and other family members. She corrected the false stories she'd told about me and apologized to people for putting them in uncomfortable positions with her lies and manipulation. By the time her own baby was born 4 months later, our relationship had improved significantly. I was genuinely excited for her and sent her a care package when she went into labor. We video chatted from the hospital so I could meet my new niece, and there was none of the weirdness or competition that had characterized our interactions during my pregnancy. The whole experience taught me a lot about family dynamics and the hidden struggles that people can carry for years without anyone realizing it. I learned that my sister's behavior hadn't really been about me or my pregnancy, but about her own deep-seated insecurities and feelings of inadequacy. I also learned that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are dealing with their own pain that we never knew existed. That doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it can help explain it and provide a path forward for healing and reconciliation. Our children are now toddlers, and they adore each other despite living across the country from one another. My sister and I talk regularly and have developed a much more honest and authentic relationship than we had before all of this happened. We've learned to communicate directly about our feelings instead of letting resentments build up over time. Looking back, I still wish she'd handled her pregnancy announcement differently and that she'd been honest about her feelings instead of acting out through manipulative behavior. But I'm grateful that we were able to work through the conflict and come out with a stronger relationship on the other side. The experience also made me more aware of the dynamics in my own family and how favoritism or perceived inequality can affect relationships between siblings even into adulthood. I've made efforts to be more conscious of how I interact with both my sister and other family members, trying to make sure everyone feels valued and supported. Sometimes the most difficult family conflicts can become opportunities for deeper understanding and stronger connections if everyone is willing to do the hard work of honest communication and genuine change. My sister and I are living proof that even seriously damaged relationships can be repaired with time, effort, and mutual commitment to growth.